So this is the beginning of my Roubo workbench. A couple of odd pieces of oak in here, but for the most part, what I was after was this stuff, which I found at my local hardwood shop. They got it marked as 7/4. It's really more like 6/4. It's about 1.5 inches, but it's southern yellow pine and it's trailer deck. These things were 16 feet long and they were made for the deck of a tractor trailer. So I had them cut down to workbench size. I'm going to take these and split them to 3 pieces per. So I'll rip them down, get 3 boards out of each one, turn them on end, and that's going to be my top of my Roubo bench. I also got an extra one. I'm going to do the same thing with these. I'm going to plane them all at the same time, and then I'm going to rip these down in 3 boards, and those will be the legs for the bench. I didn't do anything with stringers or anything else yet, but I found this stuff and I wanted to jump on it before it disappeared. So now the fun part. I got to skip plane everything. They were really flat. That's a good thing. They were really milled well, so they were very flat. But I do need to skip plane them so I can get them ripped down and then start gluing everything up. It's a process, so let's get started. Alright, so here's all my boards, and I'm going to be in pretty good shape here. I'm going to go ahead and set up. Let me show you what I've got. So I've got my planer set up here, but I'm going to take this. This is my little makeshift Infeed Outfeed table I made from melamine from my Harbor Freight planer because it didn't have one. And it works really well most of the time, but there's no edge guides to it. So basically, if you got things that are right at the edge of the width, you could slide out of the blade cutting area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out and just feed these in without the Infeed Outfeed board on there, and that way it'll run. There's little edge guides that this runs into. So right here, that'll keep these boards in the edge guides because they're not quite 12 inches. So it'll run through there, and then hopefully I'm just going to knock a little bit of the rough edges off so that I can cut these down and then start gluing up a tabletop. So anyway, let's go ahead and start planing because that's going to be fun. All right, I only have to do that about 100 more times. I won't make you watch.
A few moments later, a few inches later, 2 hours later, 1 eternity later.
And several hours later, that's what 48 feet of southern yellow pine looks like, all milled up and ready for ripping and jointing and gluing and a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyway, that part's done. The next step in making the tabletop is to rip each of the long boards into 3 equal width pieces. But to do that, I have to start by jointing one edge so it's nice and square and will run true against my fence. So let's go ahead and get that started. All right, so everything has a clean edge now, and it's time to start ripping boards. I've already started milling the boards into their three different sections. So I'm going to have about 4 inches, or a little less than 4 inches piece, because these are almost 12-inch wide boards, little thin for 12 inches. But one thing that is going on when I'm milling these is that as I run the board through for the rip cut, the pressure, the tension release from the cut is squeezing the board back together, and that is causing it to pinch on the blade and basically shutting my saw down. So what I did is I came up with something like this, which is just a little wedge of I don't know, hardwood. I think this is a walnut. So I just cut a little walnut wedge, and so as I get it run through a little bit, what I'm doing is I'm coming in, driving this wedge into the back to keep the kerf open, because that kerf is pinching. If I can keep the kerf open, it runs through the saw just fine. If it pinches on the kerf, then it squeezes the blade, shuts the saw down, and then I'm kind of left on a lurch. So that's what I've been doing. So if it happens, you'll get to see it, because not every board, but most of the long boards has had some bit of tension in the board that is released when I cut and squeezes back onto itself. So let's give another cut here and see if that happens, and you'll see what I do. Okay, so I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'll bring you in for a little bit closer look. The board right here, the kerf, is pinching down, which means I'm releasing tension, but the tension's pushing the boards together, not releasing it out this way. So basically, as that squeezes back together, it's pinching the saw blade up here, and that basically bogs down the saw. So what I'm going to do is just take my little wedge that I've got. Where's my little wedge? Right here. So I'm going to take my little wedge right here, and I'm just going to drive that right into here, and that just basically opens up that kerf enough to let that saw to freely pass through there without being squeezed. So let me go ahead and drive that in, and I'll finish the cut on this board. Alright, so just going to take this, and I can do it one of two ways. I prefer to do it long ways, but that gets kind of loose and it falls out. So when it's down here, I'm just going to drive it in just a little bit, like that. That's just enough to keep that board separated. That kerf is going to stay. It's releasing the tension this way. It's pushing it over, and basically releasing the tension on the blade, which lets it turn easily and lets me finish the cut. Okay, so these are all milled up to approximate width. They weren't all the same size boards, so they're off. Some of them, like this one's a little higher than this one. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to sticker all these for a while and let them dry, because this stuff was, it had been sitting around for a while, but it's still a little wet. And you know, if I had that much movement when I cut it, I can imagine how much movement I'll get if I do anything else like glue ups and then try to do mortise and tenons and things like that. So I want to go ahead and let this stuff have an opportunity to dry out. I could have done it before I cut it to this size, but my thinking was, you know what, the smaller the boards are, the faster they're going to dry out. So I'm going to lay these out and sticker them. I've cut a whole bunch of just, you know, thin strips like this. And so these thin strips will basically go in between the piles. I'll lay them out, put another stack on, lay them out. That's called stickering. And, you know, that's going to allow the air to circulate between them and allow them to dry a little faster. So give me a second. I'll switch the camera around, show you what I mean by doing that. And then these are going to sit for a week or two at least, just to kind of get acclimated to the way things are here in the shop. All right, so hang on just a moment. So basically I took some long little scraps of wood. This is why I always keep my scraps, because you just never know. But anyway, long scraps, cut them down to even pieces that span the length of the workpiece, or the width of the workpiece. Just stick them on like this. Then you get your next board. You can do this with wide boards, skinny boards, whatever. But it's a good way of just basically drying out your lumber. If you have it sitting around for a little while before you work on it, and just letting the air circulate around it, get it accustomed to the environment that you're in, and that way when you do get ready for actually doing anything to the boards, you know, you'll be all set. And you can just kind of space these out. Don't use 2 of them, because then what happens is you get a bow in your wood. So try to use at least 3 going across your boards, and that way you'll have even support all the way down the length of the line, and your boards are going to have a much better chance of getting dried out and not warping on you, at least not very much. That's the plan. So just going to sit here and stack some wood. All right, so there you go. They're all spaced. They've got space in between, and it's a lot of boards. So I'll give it a couple of weeks and we'll go from there. See you then.